I don't know where to begin, but I think if I don't say this now, this thing will keep following me, or worse, it will keep calling me. So please, believe everything I say. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that, for 3 years, I worked the graveyard shift at an isolated gas station in the countryside, Oregon, of those lost among miles of nothingness, surrounded by a cold, dry, and silent desert. I always thought my loneliness was just a consequence of life. I got used to the silence of 4 a.m, to the stale coffee that always seemed burnt, to the hum of fluorescent lights that flickered as if they were breathing. I got used to it, until the silence started listening back to me. That early morning began like any other. The radio crackled, trying to pick up some distant country station. The low-lying fog left the parking lot with a bluish, lifeless hue, and I rearranged the same shelves I rearranged every night. It was an empty, but predictable routine. And predictable. Even today, I realize. It's the last thing horror lets you have. Around 2:16 a.m., a truck driver pulled in to buy coffee. He was pale, and it wasn't from tiredness. While adding sugar, he suddenly said, "Have you ever heard of the stewed woman?" That gave me the chills right then and there. He explained quickly, as if he wanted to get the thought out of his mouth before it materialized. There's a woman walking on the track, wet, completely wet, as if she'd just come out of a river. But there's no river here. I laughed, somewhat uncomfortably. Roadside superstition, I thought. But he didn't laugh. He simply left the cafe and walked out, as if he had said something he shouldn't have. When he left, I felt, I can't explain it, like a damp smell spread through the air, like wet clothes left closed for days. I looked at the floor near the automatic door. There was a trail of droplets, small but perfectly aligned, like steps. I thought it was water brought by the truck driver, but something was wrong. The floor wasn't just wet. It was cold, as if it had been touched by something that shouldn't be there, and the smell of stagnant water grew stronger. When I went to check the cameras to see if there were any leaks, they glitched a little. The image shook. The screen went dark for half a second, and when he returned, there seemed to be a silhouette on the side of the road. A thin figure, still, soaked, completely immobile. I blinked, and she disappeared from the image, as if she had never been there. The first thing I felt was a shiver down the back of my neck, a coldness so deep it felt like liquid. Something told me that night wouldn't be like the others, and I should have left right then and there. I thought I had imagined that silhouette. Tiredness does things. It pushes shadows into the cameras, transforms failed pixels into people. But around 4, I heard a sound that I couldn't ignore. It sounded like the noise of wet clothes being wrung out, slowly, as if someone were peeking out from behind the shop, squeezing water from their own body. The sound was coming from the side corridor, where the empty containers and the ice machine are located. It's always quiet there. So quiet that any movement seems too close. I grabbed my flashlight. The light flickered along with my hand. Not from fear, I told myself, but from the weak coffee. That's a lie. I was already scared. When I turned the corner, the sound stopped, suddenly, as if it had been swallowed. But before I could go back inside, the automatic door behind me opened with a snap. I hadn't triggered the sensor, and there was no wind. The entire desert was at a standstill. I ran to the monitoring room and rewound the cameras, and that's when I saw it. The same figure from the roadside. Now it was right in front of the gas station, stopped a few meters from pump number 3. Water dripped from her hair to the floor, forming an uneven puddle. But the puddle didn't get any bigger. It's as if the water simply disappears upon touching the asphalt. She was completely soaked, as if she had just emerged from a deep lake. The kind of waterlogged mess that never dries. The strangest thing? Right behind her came a car, a silver sedan. He slowed down. The driver probably thought she needed help. I held my breath as I watched the recording. The car stopped beside her. She turned her face away, very slowly, as if her neck were trapped, stiff, heavy. And then, she got closer to the car, walking with shuffling, wet steps, but she had no shadow, nothing. Neither the silhouette on the ground, nor the distortion of light. It was as if the light passed through her, as if she didn't exist. The driver opened the door. Something inside me begged him not to do it, but he did. He got out of the car, looked at her, and tried to speak. And then, the camera froze. It was frozen for 7 seconds. When he returned, the car door was open. The engine is running. But the driver had disappeared. On the car seat, there was only one large, dark mark of something that looked like dirty water, and on the steering wheel, several fingerprints, as if someone had held on tight, very tightly, while the water trickled down. I stood there, staring at the screen. The drops on the ground trembled, as if my eyes refused to believe it. I knew what I had seen. I knew it wasn't tiredness. She was coming back. And this time, he was getting closer and closer to the gas station. After that driver disappeared, something changed in the air. It was as if the position had been left smaller, more stuffy, as if every wall were absorbing my breath. And no matter how hard I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, I knew it wasn't. Around take 40, the smell started. It was a heavy, almost viscous odor, a mixture of stagnant water, mold, and something that resembled dead algae. I checked the water fountain, the bathroom, the storage room. Nothing. But the smell wasn't coming from a specific place. It seemed to be coming from elsewhere, of the air itself, as if it were being exhaled from the walls. And then, the radio crackled. Not like before. This time, the sound was damp. There were bubbles, muffled pops, as if someone were talking underwater. The voice was unclear. Sometimes it sounded like a whisper, sometimes a sigh, and sometimes it felt like someone was trying to say my name. I turned off the radio. He continued, even without power. That's when I heard the first ring. Tack, tack, tack. The glass door of the gas station. Someone was tapping, with their fingertips, in a rhythmic way. Slow, wet. My body froze. It took me almost a minute to walk up to the cameras. When the screens lit up, I felt my stomach churn. She was there, the soaked woman, stop right in front of the automatic door, so close that the water dripping from her hair ran down the glass, as if it were trying to get in. Her head was tilted to the side, as if she were listening to something that only she could hear, and even wet, even trembling. She remained without a shadow. With each touch on the glass, the image from the cameras distorted. The lines were shaking, pixels were falling apart, until, with each tap, a drop would pierce the glass. First one, then two, then dozens. Water started dripping inside the gas station, slow, but impossible to ignore. I tried calling the police. The line dropped on the first touch. I tried again. Nothing. The phone only made a low noise, like water being sucked down a distant drain. I went back to the door and she wasn't there anymore. My heart raced. I hadn't heard footsteps, splashes, nothing. She had simply vanished. That's when I noticed something. In the corner of the camera screen, right at the edge of the frame, a piece of her face, soaked, property. Observing the store from behind the side wall, as if he were waiting for the exact moment to enter. The water near the door rose. My shoes started to get wet. And for the first time that morning, I was absolutely certain she didn't want help. She wanted to go in, and he was getting closer and closer to achieving it. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that corner of the screen as if she could disappear at any second. Every fiber of my being wanted to run, to flee, to vanish from there, but my legs wouldn't respond. And for some reason that I still don't understand, I continued working. He was still breathing. He continued alive, even knowing that somebody, was prowling around that post like a patient predator. The police only arrived because another driver, passing by on the road, saw the gas station in darkness and thought it was strange. They came in calling my name, pointing flashlights, asking if I was okay. All I could say was, she was here. I saw her. She's on the road, wet, without a shadow. The older policeman, a man with a hard face and a perpetually tired expression, told me to sit down. He asked if I had been drinking. I denied it. He didn't believe it. But then I pointed to the cameras. The monitoring room was still open. The water on the ground reached my ankles, and no one else seemed to notice. They stepped on it, but it didn't splash. They looked, but saw nothing. The younger police officer rewound the recordings. 5 weeks, after 3 months, then the entire last semester, and then the apparitions began. First, a truck stopped at 3:15 a.m. on an old morning. The driver got out, spoke to someone off-screen, and disappeared. Then a couple, a tourist car, a backpacker. They all did the same thing. They stopped. They were going down. They disappeared. And in all the recordings, in all of them, she was there. Sometimes near bomb site number 1, sometimes on the shoulder of the road, sometimes stopped in the middle of the road, motionless, like a waterlogged lamppost, always dripping, always with that hunched posture, as if he were listening to something inside his own head. And never, it had a shadow. "Look at this," murmured the younger policeman, bringing his face closer to the screen, and then he paused a painting. The camera was shaking a little, but you could see clearly. The woman did not touch the ground. She floated inches above him, as if submerged in an invisible lake. With each of her movements, small ripples appeared around her, like water being pushed by a body that shouldn't be there. "Is this a setup?" "Why?" the older one asked. His voice was no longer so firm. "Sir, I don't think so, but nothing prepared me for what came next." The police officer opened the recording from the previous night, and there she was, standing in front of the window, dripping, slanted, empty. Up to that point, it was to be expected. But then the police officer changed the angle, checking the internal cameras. I thought we wouldn't see anything. After all, I was alone all night. But in internal camera number 07, behind me, right behind me, while I was rearranging shelves hours earlier, she was there, inside the store, soaked, head down, as if I were a light at the bottom of a dark ocean. When I watched that, my whole body froze. I felt the same water rising up my throat. I felt her coldness in my bones. "That's not possible," I whispered. The police officer paused the image. The silence grew heavy, almost fluid. "Son, whatever that is, it's not just on the road." And for the first time, I saw real fear in a police officer's eyes. Human fear. Real fear. After we saw that image, her standing behind me inside the store, as if she had always been there, something broke inside me. You know when you realize you're not dealing with a human being? When do you understand that something doesn't follow rules, doesn't follow logic, doesn't even follow the physical world? I felt it, and I realized it too late. The police tried to remove me from the station, but every step I took outside felt like pushing my body against an invisible wall of water. My lungs were burning. My breathing became short and noisy, as if I were drowning in the air. One of the police officers grabbed my arm and asked if I needed paramedics. I tried to answer, but my voice came out muffled, bubbled. It felt like my mouth was full of water. "He's pale. Let's take him to the patrol car," someone said. But before they could move me, all the lights at the gas station flashed at once. Not just any blink. It was a profound flicker, as if the lamps were underwater and had to cross an entire ocean to light up. And then, we listened. A drag. Wet. Methodical. It wasn't coming from the entrance. It wasn't coming from the road. Vineyard inside the bathroom. The police officers pointed their flashlights. I stood behind them, trembling, panting like someone trying to hold on to the bank of a raging river. The older policeman opened the door with his foot, and there she was, standing, inside the bathroom, facing the mirror, soaked as always. Water dripped from her clothes, but the floor remained dry, as if none of it existed in the real world. She turned her head slowly. Too slow. Each degree seemed to crackle, like soaked wood splitting. And then she whispered. I swear to God, she whispered, but they weren't words. It was the sound of someone breathing inside a deep lake, a dense, muffled sound made of bubbles bursting. The police officers fired shots, but the shots missed. They simply crossed over. The woman kept staring at me, just for me. And I point with my hand, a thin, white, wrinkled hand, like someone who's been in the water too long. The light came on again, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of desert, no position, no police officers, with nothing. My fingers were wrinkled, just like hers. My t-shirt was dry, but my lungs were burning as if I had swallowed liters of water. The doctors said they found fluid in my lungs, but there was no explanation, no water source for miles. One final detail. When the recordings from that night were released, there were two different recordings. One showed the woman at the door, outside, trying to get in. The other, she showed it, inside the store, standing behind me, even though the first recording still showed her outside. Two versions of her, two identical moments, overlapping. Impossible. I'm recording this because I feel her close. I smell stagnant water in my dreams. And sometimes, when I look at the ground, I see tiny drops following my steps. If this made you uncomfortable, imagine what happens when the lights really go out. Subscribe to the channel and keep watching. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. I work at a small gas station in rural Kansas, where the night seems longer than the day. My shift starts at midnight and ends at 6 a.m., but it's after 2 a.m. that the place gets strange. It was always monotonous until the freezer started becoming a problem. At first, it was just an exaggerated cold in the freezer. I felt the air cutting my skin like thin blades, especially on the back of my neck and hands. That kind of cold that penetrates to the bone, and you know it won't go away. The metallic smell of frozen meat mixed with dampness made me uneasy. I began to notice that while everyone else in the city slept or dozed, the place was almost completely silent, until, suddenly, something would happen. A slight creaking sound, as if the freezer door were moving, but without anyone touching it. In the first month, I thought it was just the wind or a fault in the door. But the feeling of being watched began to grow. I felt invisible eyes analyzing me, and my heart beat faster, just turning my back to the freezer. Sometimes, when I was restocking the shelves or cleaning the floor, I heard shuffling footsteps that seemed to echo from inside the cold storage. Slowly, I realized that the noises had a pattern. They always happened after 2:17 a.m. Exactly, it seemed timed, as if someone was waiting for the clock to strike at that exact minute. My colleagues would sometimes joke that the freezer door asked to come out, or that it was haunted. But everyone laughed nervously, as if trying not to admit they were afraid. I didn't laugh. Deep down, I felt something heavy, almost human, inside that space. I could feel the cold seep through my skin. I could feel the vibration of the cement floor under my feet, and even the echo of my own footsteps seemed different near the freezer. The routine was simple: cleaning, organizing products, checking boxes and machines. But something began to break this monotony. Sometimes, objects would fall for no reason. A package of meat would slide off the counter and hit the floor. A small noise, but enough to make my heart race. I tried to rationalize: tiredness, imagination, wind, poorly fitted shelves. But there was something more. There always was. Something that wasn't there before, but now seemed to live within the cold space of the cold storage room. And then, one night, I heard something that made me realize it wasn't my imagination. A soft tap, almost a whisper, on the freezer door. It couldn't be human. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The door creaked softly, and I felt the air vibrate, as if someone were breathing behind it. A slow breath, almost a silent invitation. It was the first time I felt real fear. Fear of something invisible that watched my every move, waiting, perhaps, for me to make the wrong step. I didn't know it yet, but that was just the beginning. The routine I thought was safe was about to crumble, and the freezer door would be the epicenter of something I would never forget. The following weeks only made the fear grow. The silence of the gas station after 2 a.m. was no longer just silence. It was waiting. A heavy waiting, as if the very air were conscious, observing, studying my every move. I began to notice small changes that, at first, seemed insignificant. The floor next to the freezer felt colder than usual, even with the heating on. My hands sweated as I cleaned the counter, but the cold continued to cut me, running down my neck, tightening my shoulders as if someone were leaning against it, just out of my field of vision. One night, while rearranging the drinks on the shelf near the room, I heard the first clear noise, a dry knock on the freezer door, followed by a short, almost musical creak. So strange it was. My body froze. I stood there, my hands on the soda bottle, listening. There was no one there. The place was empty, silent, and yet it felt like there was a presence. The feeling of being watched intensified. I started paying attention to the timing. Always after 2 a.m., always around 2:17 a.m., the freezer would move on its own, bang, and creak. I even tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was gravity, some fault with the door, wind, any logical explanation, but intuition doesn't lie. Something was there, and it wasn't natural. That same week, another colleague commented, almost whispering, that he had seen strange marks on the door, as if someone had scratched it from the inside. I laughed nervously, unsure whether to believe him or not. But when I went to check, I felt a chill run down my spine. Thin marks, deep enough to look like human fingernails. But the door had been locked for years. No one could have left those marks, except, perhaps, something that shouldn't be there. Fear began to blend into my routine. Every noise, every echo, every shadow became a source of anxiety. Even when looking at the security camera, I felt something watching me through the screen. Sometimes I saw the reflection of a shadow moving quickly behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. Every step I took toward the freezer seemed to provoke a reaction. A creak, a bang, the air getting colder, a pressure on my shoulders. I could no longer concentrate on my work. Every noise was amplified, every shadow was suspicious. And then it happened for the first time. I was alone, lights flickering, and I heard the knock. Something called to me, a sound that was almost human, almost pleading. I hesitated, my heart racing, my hands trembling. I wanted to run, but I also needed to look. The door moved by itself, a creak that echoed through the empty post, and I felt a cold warmth pass through my body, as if someone were on the other side, just waiting for me to answer. I didn't answer. I couldn't. That was the moment I understood that normality was over. The freezer door was no longer just a door. It was a portal to something I couldn't comprehend, but which was there, constantly lurking, testing the limits of my fear. And I still didn't know how much it would haunt me. After that night, something inside the gas station changed. I felt its presence even before I heard any noise. A damp chill ran down my spine, an almost invisible pressure against my shoulders. Sometimes, I'd look at the freezer door and feel it staring back at me. There was no light, no one there, but I knew something was there. Something that shouldn't be there. One night, around 2:17 a.m., I decided to stay and observe. I stood still, breathing slowly, trying to control the fear that seemed to suck the air out of me. Then it happened. The freezer door opened slowly, creaking almost humanly. A heavy silence filled the room, and I felt the air vibrate as if someone were breathing right behind me. I could swear I heard a whisper, almost inaudible, asking to get out. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. Silence returned, but the feeling remained. I began to notice details I had previously ignored. The air near the door seemed denser, heavy. A metallic smell, mixed with something indefinable, invaded my nostrils and made me gag. Nail marks appeared and disappeared, as if something were trying to show me its presence, but without revealing its form. It was as if a shadow moved behind the glass, but dissolved when I tried to focus on it. My mind began to wander. I found myself hesitating before opening the freezer door, feeling shivers run through my body. Even the sounds of the gas station, once familiar, the click of the register, the hum of the air conditioner, now seemed to respond to the presence inside the freezer. Every step I took, every movement I made, seemed to provoke a reaction, a strange echo, a sudden creak, or the sensation of someone breathing very close, invisible. The following nights were torment, dragging noises behind me, fleeting shadows in the corners of the room, objects falling without explanation. A package of meat I left on the counter would simply slide to the floor without me having touched it. And when I tried to rationalize, tiredness, wind, a poorly fitted door, my body remembered what it had seen, what it had felt, what it would swear it had heard. Fear began to consume me. Each night, my confidence dwindled, and the post, once just a workplace, transformed into a labyrinth of uncertainties. I spent more time staring at the freezer door than doing my job. Sometimes, I felt its presence testing my limits, toying with my mind, slowly pushing me toward a state I couldn't define, fear, panic, or just madness. And doubt is what gnaws at me the most, because I still don't know if I'm hallucinating or if it really exists. But one thing is certain. The freezer has a life of its own after 2:17 a.m. Something inhabits it, and every time I get close, I feel a deep shiver down my neck, an invisible tightness in my chest, and the certainty that I'm being watched. That night, something changed. I could no longer ignore the signs. The freezer door seemed to have a will of its own, and I knew that if I approached it, it wouldn't be just a casual encounter. Around 2:17 a.m., the lights began to flicker, and the icy air became sharp, like blades piercing my skin. My heart pounded erratically, my hands trembled, and my breath came out short and ragged. But I needed to look. I needed to face it. When I reached the door, I first heard a soft, almost pleading knock. Then, a long, dragging creak, as if the door were being opened from the inside. A damp chill spread through my body, and then I felt something behind me. A breath, slow, deep, human, but with a weight that didn't belong to anyone I knew. I tried to turn around, but the reflection of my own fear paralyzed me. The shadow I saw in the freezer glass wasn't mine. It moved erratically, quickly, disappearing before I could comprehend it. An absolute silence followed. broken only by the accelerated beating of my heart. I wanted to run, scream, call someone, but the feeling that this presence held me there was overwhelming. Every muscle in my body begged for escape, but something kept me still, forcing my eyes to fix on the freezer door. It was at that moment that I noticed the fingernail marks inside the door, thin, sharp, and deep. They weren't recent, but they looked fresh, as if something had just tried to get out. The objects around me began to react strangely. A package of meat fell from the counter without me touching it. The sound of the impact echoed through the gas station, but no one answered. The shadow approached the glass, and I felt the air vibrate, heavy, dense, laden with intention. I tried to speak, but my voice died in my throat. Each attempt at movement seemed to provoke a reaction. The cold intensified. The air seemed to compress my chest, and that inexplicable metallic smell invaded my nostrils. That's when I realized something I couldn't explain. Something inside the freezer wasn't just watching me. It seemed to be assessing every hesitation, every fear, every doubt I carried with me. And then, when I tried to move away, I felt a subtle touch on my back, cold as ice, but firm, almost human. A shiver ran down my spine, and my mind collapsed for a few seconds. Reality seemed to distort, and everything I knew about the world ceased to exist in that instant. I ran out of the gas station without looking back, feeling like something invisible was still chasing me. I never managed to work after 2 a.m. again. Colleagues who tried to open the door also disappeared. Some never returned. And the cameras, they only showed the impossible. The freezer door opening by itself at 2:17 a.m., without anything or anyone coming out, just the shadow of someone who wasn't there, watching, waiting. Fear still haunts me to this day. Every time I close my eyes, I see the reflection in the glass, feel the breath behind me, and I ask myself, what if I had stayed longer? What if the shadow had really touched me? After that night, my life was never the same. I left the post and never went back. My colleagues, the few who still worked the night shift, avoided talking about the freezer. Some moved to other cities. Others, they say, simply disappeared without explanation. And me, I remained trapped by what I saw, by what I felt, unable to erase it from my memory. In the following days, I relived every detail mentally, trying to rationalize it. The biting cold that ran through my body, the feeling of being watched, the shadow on the glass that disappeared as soon as I looked. It all seemed impossible. And yet, I knew it was real. The funny thing is that, even from a distance, each night is a reminder. When the house is quiet, when the wind blows just right, I feel the presence again. It's not just fear, it's as if something is following me, testing my limits from afar. I reviewed the camera footage several times. The freezer door opens by itself at 2:17 a.m. As always, there's no logical explanation, no visible hand, no strong enough draft, just the shadow, which seems conscious, watching, waiting. My mind wants to reject what I saw, wants to convince me it was all just tiredness or paranoia. But the evidence insists, cold and silent, reminding me that there is something I cannot touch, but that touched me in some way. The aftermath of terror is the worst. It's living with constant doubt. It's hearing any noise in the middle of the night and feeling the same deep chill I felt at the gas station. It's waking up in a cold sweat with the feeling that someone is breathing behind you, even though you're alone. It's realizing that the fear didn't stay in the freezer. It came with me, lodging itself in every shadow, every silent corridor, every reflective surface that could hide invisible eyes. The feeling of emotional vulnerability accompanies me daily. Fear, anxiety, regret. Emotions that I previously only knew in an abstract way are now constant companions. I tried to write about what happened, to tell someone, but confession is limited. Words cannot translate the intensity of what I experienced. Still, I write, because if I don't, I feel I will completely lose my mind. And the final doubt remains. Was that real, or was I just a victim of my own tired mind? But I know deep down that there's something more, something that can't be explained, but that exists, something that waits patiently, and that perhaps is still lurking, ready to manifest itself again. Every time I think about it, I feel the same heavy, slow breath on my back. And the question that never goes away is, what if I hadn't managed to get out in time? Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. I should have ignored it, gone about my routine as usual. But something that night shattered everything I knew. I work at an isolated gas station in rural Michigan. It's a place where the neon lights of the store blend with the cold wind that seeps in through the doors every time someone walks by. At night, the outside world seems to disappear, and all that remains is the sound of my own heart and the distant rumble of some car on the road. My routine is simple. I check the cameras, clean the floor, serve coffee or snacks to the few travelers who pass by. In the silence of the early morning, every detail is amplified. The creak of the door, the crack of the wooden floor, even the smell of gasoline seems stronger, almost suffocating. I like to know every movement of the gas station, every shadow, every corner that normally goes unnoticed during the day. But that week, something started to seem wrong. At first, I thought it was just paranoia. A silver car appeared on the cameras a few nights in a row. Nothing extraordinary at first glance, except that no one reported seeing it. No customers came in or even looked at me, and I, alone, analyzing the recordings, noticed a pattern. The car would park at the pump, the driver would get out for a moment, look at the store, and go back to the car, and then disappear. It was as if it only existed on the cameras. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was messing with the recordings, some software error. But every night was the same. The car always appeared at the same time, always following the same pattern. And as I watched, I started noticing details that sent shivers down my spine. Sometimes it seemed like it was approaching the camera, not in a natural way, as if it were trying to get me to see it, to get someone to notice it. I began to feel something constant on my back, a chill on the nape of my neck that wouldn't go away. My heart would race when a breeze passed through the door without me opening it, or when I heard a slight crackling sound coming from the empty parking lot. Was it just my imagination? Maybe. But the feeling was real. Every shadow seemed to have a life of its own. Every sound carried a weight I couldn't explain. And then came the night I noticed something different. Reviewing the recording, the car was closer to the camera than ever before. For a moment, I thought I saw a hand lightly tapping on the window, but I doubted myself. I was alone, in the absolute silence of the gas station, and the idea that I might be imagining it all made me feel vulnerable, exposed, as if something invisible was watching my every move. I tried to turn off the monitor, take a deep breath, convince myself that nothing was happening. But in that icy silence, in that place where the light barely reaches, I already knew that this would not be an ordinary night. The following night, the routine seemed the same, but something inside me had changed. I felt as if the entire station was breathing along with me, as if every shadow had consciousness. Reviewing the cameras, the silver car appeared again at exactly the same time, but this time, it was closer. Much closer to the lens, as if it wanted me to notice every detail. My chest tightened, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down the back of my neck. I was alone, but I had the feeling that someone was watching me, invisible, lurking. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia. But then I heard something strange, a faint scratch on the shop window, almost imperceptible. I stood up slowly, the floor creaking beneath my feet, and stared into the silent night outside. Nothing. Just the wind, the streetlights illuminating the empty parking lot. But the shiver down my spine wouldn't go away. My breath was short, and my hands trembled as I tried to note the time the car appeared. Gradually, I noticed small changes happening around the station. Objects moved from their places, as if they had been touched, even though I was careful. The lights flickered, and the sound of my own heart seemed to echo off the empty walls. Sometimes there was a strange, metallic smell, like scrap iron or old blood, but I couldn't identify its origin. Every detail that had previously gone unnoticed now seemed laden with meaning, as if trying to warn me of something. Reviewing the recording from the third night, I noticed something that made me recoil. The driver, that man in the silver car, seemed to be watching me through the camera. Not with normal eyes. Something in his gestures, his posture, conveyed an intention that shouldn't exist. I felt he knew I was there, alone, that I was watching. And what was worse, he seemed pleased with it. My whole body reacted. I felt a chill seeping into my bones, my skin tingling. I started to wonder if I was going crazy. The isolation of the night, the monotonous repetition of the routine, everything seemed to amplify my perceptions. But every time I looked at the cameras, I couldn't deny the pattern. The car appeared. The driver got out, looked at the store, and went back to the car. Nobody else ever saw anything. Nobody else commented on anything. Only me. And I was starting to doubt my own sanity. That night, for the first time, I felt something touch my shoulder. Or at least I thought I did. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. Only silence, heavy and dense, filling every corner of the station. The feeling lingered, as if an invisible presence were there, testing my limits. I was vulnerable, scared, and completely alone. And yet, a part of me couldn't stop looking at the cameras, anxious and terrified at the same time. From that point on, I knew something was about to happen. Something that couldn't be ignored, something that couldn't be explained. The following nights became a silent nightmare. The silver car kept appearing on the cameras, getting closer and closer to the lens, as if it were crossing reality until it reached my vantage point. I couldn't sleep anymore. My whole body reacted to each click of the monitor, each distant headlight in the parking lot. The feeling of being watched was no longer imaginary. It was palpable, physical, like a weight on my chest. One night, while organizing some shelves behind the counter, I heard something that almost made me choke. A crackling sound coming from outside, as if someone were scratching the concrete. I froze, trying to rationalize, but the wind couldn't make that sound. Not like that. My heart raced, my hands sweated, and the sweat trickled down my neck. Every fiber of my body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. Something held me there, as if that store were a trap. Reviewing the older recordings, I noticed small changes that weren't there before. Shadows that moved quickly, distorting the image, small ripples in the gas station window, as if someone were breathing on the other side. Sometimes, it seemed as if the driver's figure would dissolve and reappear, only to disappear again, leaving a trail of unease on the monitor. I felt a chill on the back of my neck, a shiver running down my spine, and I began to seriously doubt my own sanity. The physical sensations became unbearable. Sometimes I felt a light touch on my hand, as if someone were running their fingers over my skin, but there was no one there. The temperature would suddenly plummet, making my bones ache, and the silence would become deafening. The normal noises of the gas station, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind in the trees seemed amplified and distorted, as if each sound carried malevolent intentions. One early morning, while looking at the parking lot, I had the impression that a shadow was moving in the streetlight, a quick human figure, but strange in form. I couldn't make out the face, but the feeling of being watched, followed, accompanied my every move. My breathing became short, almost impossible, and my hands trembled as I touched the counter, and the car The car was always there, somewhere, as if it had a life of its own. With each new recording, it seemed to move forward, to get closer to me, crossing not just physical distance, but something I couldn't name. I felt it was waiting for the right moment, that the presence of that driver wasn't just a random pattern. It was a silent promise of something terrible. My mind started playing tricks on me. Was it real? Was I going crazy? Or did it truly exist, waiting, watching, ready to reveal itself in a way that no rational explanation could contain? Every passing night, I knew something was about to happen, and nothing, and no one, could prepare me for it. That night, something changed. I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't be just another early morning. Reviewing the recording of the silver car, my stomach clenched with fear. The driver was closer to the camera than he had ever been before. It wasn't just physical proximity. There was an intention there that came through the screen, straight to me. My whole body reacted, a cold shiver running down my spine, my hands sweating as I gripped the monitor remote. And then he did something that still haunts me to this day. He tapped on the camera lens with his knuckles, a dry, rhythmic sound, impossible to ignore. My heart raced, and I felt my chest tighten, my breath shortening. For a moment, I thought it might just be a reflection, some glitch in the image. But the sound, it was too real. It wasn't electronic. It wasn't artificial. It was human, or at least, human enough to terrify me. I stood frozen behind the counter, feeling the air of the gas station weigh heavily on me. Each shadow seemed to lengthen, each sound amplified, and that silence carried intention, a presence watching me, measuring my every move. The sensation was so intense that I felt a chill on the back of my neck, and for a moment, my vision blurred, as if the world were trembling around me. When I looked at the screen, my stomach churned. The driver's face was purple, as if he'd been hanged. But still, he was smiling. A wide smile, impossibly human, yet completely grotesque. I could swear he was staring at me, and there weren't enough barriers between us. The feeling of dread was so intense that my hands trembled and dropped the monitor's remote control on the floor with a dry crack. I tried to convince myself I was hallucinating, that my exhausted body and weary mind were creating shapes and sounds to frighten me. But the car was still there, stopped, the driver banging on the window, smiling at me through the concrete and metal. Each bang seemed to echo through the gas station, laden with an intention I couldn't comprehend. It was as if he were toying with me, testing my limits, waiting for me to crumble. My whole body reacted with physical fear. Cold coursed through my bones, my legs felt unable to move, and my mind screamed for an explanation. But no explanation came. All that existed was that purple, smiling face, that impossible presence, and me, alone, completely alone. When I finally managed to breathe, I heard a slight crack coming from the gas station door. A cold breeze swept through my body. I looked at the parking lot, and there was no one there, just a heavy silence, waiting for me to realize that it wasn't over yet. I knew, at that moment, that something had crossed the line between reality and nightmare, and that I would never be the same again. The following nights became a silent torment. I couldn't look at the cameras for very long anymore. Every time I looked, I felt that same chill down my spine, that feeling of being watched even when the parking lot was empty. The silver car didn't appear every night, but when it did, I knew. Something within reality had changed, something I couldn't control or understand. I tried to return to normal, maintain my routine, clean shelves, attend to any customer who might show up. But the silence now had weight. Each of my steps seemed to echo off the empty walls, and the wind that entered through the creaking doors seemed to carry whispers I couldn't decipher. I caught myself several times looking at the road, hoping to see the headlights of the silver car reappear, even knowing it might just be my imagination. The worst part wasn't what I saw on the cameras anymore, but what I felt when I was alone. The shadows seemed to stretch, drawing closer to me. The air grew heavy, dense, as if it were breathing along with me. At times, I swear I felt a light hand touch my shoulder, even though there was no one there. Every noise seemed laden with intention, every sound, every click from the gas station, as if reminding me that he might be there, waiting. One night, while reviewing the most recent recording, I noticed something that made me tremble to my bones. The car appeared, parked as always, but there was no movement, no driver, no approach, just the silent image of an abandoned vehicle, and, for a few seconds, I swear I saw a shadow forming in the cabin, something that looked like a smile. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. He was still there. He always had been. Now, even during the day, every time I pass the gas station or look at that empty road, I feel the weight of that invisible presence, and doubt consumes me. Am I hallucinating? Or is he still lurking there, waiting, watching, as if he were a part of reality that no one else can see? The feeling of vulnerability, the certainty that something is watching me, has never left me. If this made you uncomfortable, imagine what comes next. Subscribe. If you've listened this far, perhaps you're already feeling the whispers. And if one day you pass by a quiet gas station, alone at night, remember the silver car. Remember that some presences don't appear to everyone. Some reveal themselves only to those who are ready or condemned to see them. And me, I promised I'd never tell, but I can't carry this weight anymore. Now, the silence of the post and the cold feeling on the back of my neck are my constant companions, reminding me that sometimes looking at reality is enough to realize that true terror doesn't need words. It simply exists and observes. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. I promised myself I would never tell anyone, but I can no longer carry this weight alone. Perhaps, if you listen carefully, you can feel the same chill down your spine that I felt that night. I'm a truck driver. I spend more time alone on the road than anywhere else in my life. That particular shift was an ordinary one. Empty road, truck headlights illuminating only the asphalt ahead, radio tuned to an old station playing only distant voices and almost forgotten songs. The wind whipped against the cab, making the metal creak, and the smell of diesel mingled with the damp cold of Alabama. It was late, later than I should have been awake, but nothing was wrong. At least, I thought so. It looked like an abandoned gas station when I decided to stop. The lights flickered faintly, and the gas station sign creaked with every gust of wind. I put on the handbrake, turned off the engine, and spent a few minutes just breathing, trying to shake off the tiredness that squeezed my eyes. It's strange how routine can be so comforting until something out of the ordinary invades that comfort. That's when I heard the first sound. Soft tapping. Very soft. As if someone were trying to get my attention, without me immediately noticing. I turned my head, and there was nothing. Just the old gas pump, the gas station window reflecting my own tired expression, and the echo of my racing heart. I stood still, trying to rationalize. It's the wind. It's just the wind hitting the pump. But that sound, it was human. Very human. I picked up the radio, turned the station back on, but the music seemed more distant. The creaking of the truck, the whistling of the wind, even the sound of my own fingers tapping on the steering wheel seemed too loud. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. A chill ran down my neck, and I felt the sweat trickle down my hands as I gripped the steering wheel. The air inside the cab felt heavier, as if it were impregnated with something I couldn't identify. Then I realized there was someone out there. I couldn't see clearly, but a presence was moving among the shadows of the post, a figure that seemed human, but which disappeared when I blinked. My legs trembled, and every fiber of my being begged me to get out of there. But I couldn't. Not at that moment. Something told me to wait, not to act rashly. And I obeyed. I picked up the phone. I called 911, my voice trembling more than I wanted to admit. Every word that came out of my mouth seemed to echo in the booth, and for a moment, I heard a strange sound in the background, almost a whisper, low, indistinct, but human, and at the same time, not. The person on the other end of the phone asked what happened, and I said, "There's someone out here. I think you need help." I didn't know if I was right, if the help was for me or for whoever was out there. While I waited, I looked through the glass. Nothing. Only the shadow of the wind and the reflection of my own face. But something was moving. Silent, subtle, almost as if it were playing with me. The fear wasn't immediate. It was growing, like a tide that slowly floods every corner of your body. And in that silence, in that endless wait, I felt true terror for the first time. The wait seemed endless. Every second inside the cabin felt like my heart had stopped and then started again with a force that made me dizzy. I looked at the clock, 2:13 a.m. The wind picked up outside, and now it seemed to carry a strange sound, a whisper I couldn't identify. I didn't know if I was hearing correctly, if my tired brain was making it up, or if there was really someone there. The shadow was closer. I could feel its presence on the side of the truck, where the glass reflected only fragments of what my eyes couldn't decipher. It wasn't entirely human, but it wasn't completely something I could understand either. My hands were cold, and the steering wheel felt like it was slipping under my fingers. Every creak of the truck's metal made me jump in fright. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady as I called 911. "There's someone out here. I think they need help," I said, the weight of exhaustion and fear mixed together. There was a low noise in the background, almost a whisper, that seemed to come from outside the cabin, but the call picked it up so the operator could hear it too. She asked me to explain further, and as I spoke, I glanced at the passenger side window. Something was touching the glass, just a hand, or a whole figure. I couldn't tell. I only felt a chill run down my spine and a shiver that ran through my whole body. I tried to rationalize, maybe it's another truck driver, someone who got lost. But even as I thought that, a part of me knew there was no one there, no other vehicle, no engine sound, just that whisper, low, human, and yet impossible. The attendant asked if I could move inside the booth, but something told me not to open the door. He, or she, or it, mustn't realize I'm watching, I thought, unable to explain why. Every moment inside the booth made the space seem smaller, more suffocating. I could hear my own blood rushing, the air rushing in and out with difficulty, and the distant echo of what sounded like breathing on the glass. My legs were trembling, my thoughts were racing. The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Please come quickly. I don't know how much longer I can hold out," I said, my voice almost breaking. And that's when I heard the first firm knock. Not very loud, but enough to chill my blood. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The glass rattled. My hand slipped from the steering wheel. My heart raced. I looked outside again. Nothing visible, just shadows and the flickering headlight. But the feeling that someone or something was watching me persisted. There was no logical explanation. I wanted to believe it was all just my tired mind, but each new sound, each beat, each whisper told me it wasn't fantasy. It was real, and I didn't know if I would survive until the police arrived. I stood motionless, holding the phone, listening to every crack, every invisible scratch, every breath the wind carried and brought back. The booth, which had once been my safe haven, now felt like a prison. And the most terrifying thing, knowing that, out there, someone needed help. Or perhaps that it was I who needed it. The minutes dragged on as if time had grown fat and heavy, suffocating each beat of my heart. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers tingled, and yet I couldn't hang up. Every noise outside the truck seemed amplified. Every creak of metal sounded like approaching footsteps. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt a presence. Something or someone was watching me, gauging my fear, testing my patience. The wind outside carried sounds I couldn't identify. Sometimes it seemed like a distant whisper. Other times, just the creaking of the gas pump or the truck door swaying. But what truly chilled me were the shuffling footsteps that echoed on the concrete. Slow, too human to be just wind. Slowly, they stopped exactly where I couldn't see, the passenger side. I tried to turn on the radio, but there was only static, long hisses that sounded like a muffled scream. I'm going crazy, I thought, but something told me I wasn't. My body was tense, muscles rigid, every drop of cold sweat running down my back. I could feel the air heavy, as if every molecule were impregnated with something invisible. And then, silence. A silence so heavy I could hear my own heart bursting in my chest. I looked in the rearview mirror and, for a moment, thought I saw a figure. I couldn't make anything out, just a shadow that blended into the darkness of the road and the flickering light of the gas station. My stomach clenched. I felt the air thin, as if someone had sucked the atmosphere out of the cabin. My breath became short. Each breath seemed impossible. With each passing second, the fear grew. But still I needed to move. I needed to act. But there was nowhere to run. The phone, still connected to 911, picked up a strange sound again. A whisper so faint that if I blinked, I would have missed it. But I didn't. It was coming from outside, from the passenger window. I looked, but there was no one there. Only my own reflection, distorted by the flashing lights and the fog forming outside. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but my intuition screamed that it was real, and every passing second increased the feeling of panic. I tried to focus on the attendant's instructions. Stay calm, the police are on their way. But her words seemed distant, swallowed by the silence that filled the cabin. It was a silence heavy with expectation of something about to happen, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. The shadow seemed closer. I could feel the pressure of its gaze, cold and invisible, and the creaking of the truck seemed to have acquired a life of its own, as if it were breathing along with me. Then, a new sound froze me. A tap on the window, slow and deliberate. A sound that had no explanation, but that clearly said, "I know you're here." My chest rose and fell rapidly, my icy hands trying to grip the steering wheel. Time seemed to have stopped, and I realized, for the first time, that the thing out there might not be human. And that, if it were, it wouldn't go away so easily. Finally, the distant sound of sirens cut through the night. It was the police. A momentary, almost physical relief washed over me. I wanted to run out of the truck, to scream, but my legs were heavy, stiff, as if fear had frozen every muscle. The wind, which had previously been merely bothersome, now seemed to push against me, against my will to escape. When the officers arrived, my heart felt like it was going to burst with nervousness and anxiety. I rushed to open the truck door, my trembling hands trying to show that I was okay, but that something had happened. They looked at me curiously, and I could barely speak properly. Someone was out here. I don't know," I stammered, unable to form complete sentences. Then I saw it. The truck was different. The passenger door, which I was sure I had locked, was open. The gas pump was lying on the ground, out of place, spreading a strong, acrid smell. My stomach churned, and looking at the trail on the ground, I noticed something that froze me completely. 2 sets of footprints leading to the woods surrounding the gas station. But when the police moved in to investigate, only one pair returned, mine. The other simply disappeared, as if it had never existed. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I was paralyzed. The night was silent again, only the wind whispering through the trees, carrying the echo of something I couldn't identify. The feeling of being watched didn't diminish. The shadow, or whatever had been there, was no longer visible, but I could feel its presence. Every muscle in my body trembled, and my eyes filled with tears I couldn't hold back. The police officers asked me questions, but I could barely answer. "Was it human?" they asked. "I don't know." "I don't think so," I murmured. And, at that moment, the doubt that consumed me more than the fear itself overwhelmed me. Had I really seen it? Or was my mind about to give way under the weight of exhaustion and terror? While the officers were investigating, I felt something lightly touch my shoulder. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I turned around, but there was no one there. Just the elongated shadow of the truck cast by the headlights of a police car. I knew it wasn't normal. I knew something had followed me, watched me, and maybe was still there. The police finally took me outside, trying to calm me down. But inside, I knew that night wasn't over. The footprints, the whisper, the shadow. None of it fit into a logical explanation. And even now, when I try to rationalize, a part of me refuses to believe it's all over. The thing out there, it didn't come back. But it's still there, somehow, in the shadows, waiting. When the police drove away, I was left alone with the truck and the echo of what had happened. The cold feeling on the back of my neck lingered, and for a moment, I swore I heard that whisper again, weak, distant, carrying an implicit promise. It's not over. Not yet. I returned to the truck a few hours later, with daylight trying to penetrate the darkness left behind by the night. Everything seemed normal at first glance. The empty road, the silent gas station, the wind carrying only the smell of earth and diesel. But inside me, nothing was normal. Every muscle still trembled. Every breath came with a constant feeling of alertness. I knew that something had changed in me, and that the night wasn't over, even if the sun said otherwise. I rummaged through my things, trying to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, that the exhaustion and isolation of the road had played a cruel trick on me. But the marks on the ground, the footprints leading into the woods, those weren't a figment of my imagination. And the absence of the second person, the feeling that something had passed through my world without leaving a trace, still haunted me. I started driving again, trying to push away the fear, but each kilometer seemed to bring me back to that night. Sometimes, at traffic lights or in the light of some random gas station, I swore I saw shadows between trees or between buildings, shapes that disappeared when I looked directly at them. My heart raced. The sweat poured down again, and the feeling that something invisible was watching my every move persisted. I haven't been able to sleep properly since then. Every nighttime noise, every creaking door, every rustle of the wind makes me wonder, has he returned? Has he always been there, just waiting for the right moment to approach again? I have no answers, only questions that gnaw at my mind, and I know I will never be the same again. Fear has become a part of me, a constant whisper that insists on existing, even when I am alone. Sometimes I close my eyes and hear that almost human sound again, that low whisper that came from the passenger side. And I realize that, somehow, it still haunts me. I don't know if it was real or if my mind broke that night. But I know I felt something that shouldn't have been felt, something that shouldn't exist. If this made you uncomfortable, imagine what comes next. Subscribe. Because stories like this don't end with the light of day. They linger, whispering, waiting for you to listen. If you listen to the end, comment, "I heard the whispers," and if you want more stories like this, just follow the voice. What I can say for sure is that when you're alone on a deserted road, looking at shadows that seem human but aren't, think, sometimes, the last cry for help isn't for you, but for something that should never have been called upon.